The Octagon is where records are broken and new legends are born. Today we dive into the top 10 UFC records that have left an undeniable mark on the sport. And while some records seem impossible to beat, today we are talking about ones that could possibly break in the near future. Kicking off our list, we have a legendary fighter in Jamila who has the record for the most wins in UFC history. Does anyone know how many wins that is? Let me know in the comments down below. I'll give you 3 seconds. Well, if you guessed 26, then you were right. Now, obviously, to have 26 wins, you would have had to fought many times, and this is just a testament to his longevity, which honestly is a miracle on its own. But actually, there's 3 fighters who are right around the corner and chasing him down in Max Holloway, Dustin Poirier, and Charles Oliveira, with all having 22 wins. Now, personally, I feel like the one that's closest to catching up to him is Max. And I know this might sound weird because they all have the same amount of wins, but Max is not only the youngest, but in my opinion, he's only entering his prime, which is crazy to say considering how long he's been fighting in the UFC for. But Dustin said that if he's not fighting for the title, why would he still keep fighting? So he might be retiring soon, we don't know. Charles has showed interest in coming back recently, and I hope he does because he's one of my favorite fighters of recent years. But I don't see him getting 4 more wins in the UFC, or rather, I don't see him sticking around long enough to get 4 more wins. Whereas Max, I feel like he's going to stick around, get those 4 more wins, and keep going. I feel like he's going to beat Ilya next, and then wherever he defends his title again, he'll beat them unless it's Volk. Volk, obviously, we know Volk knows how to beat Max. But I'm going to say this is 99% chance of happening. Next up, we have the record for the fastest submission in UFC history, and that goes to the Queen, Ronda Rousey, who had an insane 14 seconds, which honestly is just legendary. Ronda got Kat Zingano with an armbar, and before you knew it, the fight was over. Now, obviously, this is going to be a record that's going to be extremely difficult to beat, and some might even say impossible to beat. But if there's anyone that I think that could do it, it must be Charles the Bronx. Like, his heavy grappling style and his brilliant submissions, I don't see anyone else doing it. I'm going to say this one has a 10% chance of happening. Okay, for the next record, we're going back to big old Jamila with the record for the most UFC fights in history, with an insane 44 fights. Like, most fighters in their career don't fight 44 times, and he fought in just the UFC 44 times. It's insane, and it's honestly a testament to his durability. And I don't see many fighters getting close. The only one that I would say has a chance of doing it is Raul Rosas Jr., who is only 19 years old, and he just fought on UFC Noche. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, so forgive me if I'm not. But he's only 19, he has 5 fights already in the UFC, and for the most part, if he stays active and fit and doesn't cause any problems or does anything to get on the UFC's bad side like Makhachev, I generally think he'd do it. He has years still to come, but let's wait and see. I'll say this one is a 50% chance of happening. Okay, moving on, we got Mr. Decision himself. No, I'm not talking about Belal Muhammad, I'm talking about Neil Magny. Neil Magny has a whopping 14 decision wins. Honestly, his testament to win fights smartly without getting a finish is both impressive as it is boring. Now, there's only one person who I think that would come close to beating that, and that obviously is Belal Muhammad. Now, Belal Muhammad is the person you probably would have thought of if I said who has the most decision wins in UFC history. And you wouldn't be wrong. He actually has a whopping 12 wins, and I don't see that changing. Like, now that he has the belt around his waist, I don't think he's going to risk things more and go for the finish. If anything, I think he's going to play it safer and just try to out-wrestle and win by decision again. But his next fight should be against Shavkat Rakhmonov, and I don't see that fight going well for him. I think Shavkat beats him. But overall, I would say that this is a 90% chance of happening. I don't see Belal, even if Belal loses the next fight, I see him winning his 2 after that. And that will tie the record. Whereas, I guess Neil Magny can also get more. But I think at the end of both their careers, Belal Muhammad's going to have the record. So I'm going to say 90% chance of happening. Okay, now this one is a lot more specific to a specific division, and this is the most finishes in welterweight history. And that goes to the legend, Matt Brown, with a whopping 15 finishes. Now, that just shows testament to what a killer he used to be, but there's an even scarier killer on the come-up, and I'm sure you already know who that is. Now, this guy has 18 fights, 18 finishes, all wins. Perfect record. I don't think anyone else can have a more perfect record. And I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. If you know what it is, write it down in the comments because I'm going to say who in 3 seconds. Of course, it's Shavkat Rakhmonov. I just spoke about him. This guy is a monster. I feel like he's just going to finish Bilal next if he fights for the title. I'm praying that he does. He deserves it. But yeah, I just see him beating it. I would say this one has an 80% chance of happening. He's still very young. He has that killer instinct. And he's dangerous on all fronts. I already spoke about someone with the most finishes. What about the longest win streak? Now this goes to the GOAT of the middleweight division in my opinion. I'm sure many would agree. Anderson Silva with a whopping 16 fight win streak. Now that is insane. Like let's just talk about that. Most fighters don't last 16 fights in the UFC. This man had a 16 fight win streak. That just shows the dominance that he has, and I think a lot of newer fight fans just don't realize how good he was. Maybe they only watch the fight of him and Adesanya and they just forget what a killer and what a legend he used to be. But now, the man to beat this record, in my humble opinion, and I think most of you would agree, is obviously Islam Makhachev. Islam has a whopping 14 fight win streak going now, and let's be honest, who do you see beating him? Whoever he versus next for the title, whether that be Arman, if Arman wins the fights for interim title, I don't know, I hope he does. Whether it's Arman or maybe the Bronx beats Chandler and then he gets the title next. I see him beating both of them again. So realistically, he's gonna blow it out of the park. He's already on 14 fights. He only needs 2 more, which shouldn't be too difficult. And then who's after that? Who's the next up and comer who's gonna challenge him? I don't see anything different. I just see him keep winning. So I'm gonna say this one is 100% chance of falling, provided nothing bad happens to Islam or anything. But I would say 100% chance. But let me know what you guys think. The next record is incredibly niche, and I'm sure most of you probably wouldn't have expected this, but it's the most UFC bonuses in history. Now, I'm sure you can name some fighters that you'd probably think would have won this, like maybe a Conor or who's another very interesting fighter, Justin Gaethje, but I mean, he is fairly new. Maybe John Jones, but no, it actually goes to Charles the Bronx Oliveira with a whopping 19. Now, obviously, I see Charles just getting more and more. Whichever fight he fights in is gonna be one of the most interesting on the night. And personally, that one made him one of my favorite fighters in recent years. But I think maybe he has another 5 fights in him, and if he gets performances, bonuses for all, he'll end on 24, which is insane. But the person who I think could beat it is maybe Tom Aspinall, but that's Dana kind of has an agenda against him, as we can clearly see. But Tom's explosiveness, his energy, like, it's just the most exciting to watch. Yes, his fights don't last long, but I really enjoy watching his fight. I'm going to say this one has a 40% chance of happening, but if there's anyone else that you think could do it, let me know who and let me know why. Okay, well, I'm sure many of you know I have very choice words for John Jones at the moment, but you can't understate his previous dominance, especially with his neck record, which is the most title fight wins in history, and he has an insane 15, which just shows the dominance that he has at his prime, and honestly makes it more sad to watch him now make excuses not to face the best guy. But I don't know, John's dominance from then, I mean, he's going to go up now. He's obviously going to beat Stipe, and then as he said, he'll probably retire. It's most likely his last fight. So let's say he goes to 16. The only person who's close is actually Amanda Nunes on 11. I know what you're going to say. Oh, Fayadi, she's retired. I know. But she did mention interest in coming back to fight Kayla Harrison if Kayla Harrison wins the title. Now, obviously, there's a lot of things that could go into that. First of all, will Kayla win the title? I personally think that she will. But if she doesn't, then we won't get Amanda back. And even if she does, will Amanda still want to come back? I don't know. And if she does come back, honestly, I see her beating the whole division still. I don't see anyone that can go up to the Lioness. And honestly, if she does come back, I think she can do it. I think she can get the 4 fights. Yeah, the 5 fights that she needs to tie the record. But I don't see her coming back, honestly. So I'm going to give this a 30% chance because we don't know if she's coming back. Okay, when you think of legendary knockouts, you gotta think of Jorge Masvidal. Now, obviously, he has the record for the fastest knockout in UFC history at an insane 5 seconds.
The fight clock is brought to you by Modelo. One of the greatest knockouts you'll ever see!
Now, just to give you an example of how quick that is, if a fighter even touches gloves, it's finished. You can't, the time's up. You can't beat that record. And honestly, the only person who I could say might beat this record is, again, Tom Aspinall. He has the shortest average cage time in the UFC in about 1 minute and 20 seconds. But Tom is such a nice, loving guy. I don't see a situation where he doesn't touch gloves. Like, even now, him and Jones are having a little beef. If they had to fight, I still think he would touch gloves. So I'm going to say this one is like a 5% chance of getting beat, because honestly, the amount of teams that need to go right for this to be beaten is insane. Okay, finally, the last record that we're talking about in this video, I'm going to end the video the same way I started it, and that's with the legend Jim Miller. Now, he currently holds the record for the most submission attempts in history at a whopping 48. But there is a man right on his tail, and I'm sure you can guess where that is. Obviously, it's Charles the Bronx Oliveira. Now, he has a whopping 44. Now, I'm going to say this one has a 100% chance of getting beat. He'll probably attempt 4 submissions in his next fight against Michael Chandler. And then he'll just do more later on down the line. So I would say this is easily 90% chance of happening. What record do you think is the hardest to beat? And who do you think might beat it? Let me know down in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this video, then maybe check out this video on how Alex Pereira continues to save the UFC. Please like, subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one.